Right now, we have House Bill 2 that creates a tremendous amount of concern. And we have a tremendous honor to have our mayor, McKinney, that's going to come in and tell us the effect that House Bill 2 is going to have on our community. Sir, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, come on up.
Appreciate it.
Now, we want to turn off this row, I believe. Turn off that front row.
I look better if you turn off all the lights.
The lights, the party doesn't.
So on the presentation, I've got a few slides that are McKinney focused, but just to give perspective, McKinney's going to be representative of many of the cities, certainly in Collin County. So if you're not from McKinney, the data is still going to be relative to the discussion you're going to have. Go to the first slide. So Texas cities, right? We know that we're the best state. We know that we're the best county. We rank among the top cities in the nation for job creation, population growth, and best management. In Collin County, we have two of the fastest top 3 growing cities in the country. That's our beautiful historic downtown, by the way. Yeah. Next slide.
Trying to get there. We've been working these days just Here we go.
Texas lead the nation because they provide the services and infrastructure that businesses need and the quality of life people want. And I'll get to the meat of this presentation if you like. If you're from McKinney, you already know the things that are not shown on the screen right now for some reason. We're voted #1 best place to live, and there it goes. #8 for first-time home buyers, but I guess we're lagging. You can skip to the next slide. There it is. Best place to live by Money Magazine in 2014. If you didn't know that. Next slide. You can go to the next slide. McKinney-centric again. So, property taxing entities in the state. I'm sure everyone here knows that. Cities collect 16% of property taxes within the state. School districts collect 54%. Special districts, college districts, for example, utility districts would fall into that, are 13%, counties 17%. Next slide.
Doesn't always want to take it. I know what's going on.
What's that?
Doesn't always want to
Yeah.
slide over.
So again, this is McKinney, but it's going to be very representative of other cities in Collin County. Median price home may vary, so this dollar amount may vary, but the average total tax levy in the city of McKinney is broken up as you see it. ISD is $5,442 an average home tax levy. City of McKinney is $1,797. Collin County is $619, and in Collin College $278.
Mayor, how are you dividing that between homeowners and businesses?
This is not broken out, but roughly 80% right now is residential, 20% is business. Something we're working diligently to change and bring business and commercial tax base up.
That number is just for the homeowners?
No, so that's property tax levy in general.
In general,
Yes.
for both homes and businesses?
Yeah, it's based on the average property tax levy for the home, but it's
Thank you.
proportionate for the businesses as well. Let me make sure I was clear on that. That was for a particular homeowner, but those percentages are accurate whether it's a business or a home. But to the average $348,000 home. Okay. What do you get per month? Where does your money go every month out of the average levy? $10 goes to Parks and Recreation, $4 to libraries, $69 goes to public safety, public works $12. In McKinney, our public safety represents about 46–47% of our budget. There are cities in this state that represents 80% of the budget. Texas property taxes are higher in great part because legislation has been cutting state share funding for education. As you know, and you saw on the slide before, school taxes represent the largest portion of your property taxes. School taxes in 2011 education funded by the state in 2011. The state funded 48%, property owners 52%. Today that share is 38% from the state, 62% by property owners. Of course, the state decreases, we make up the difference locally. This slide talks about in 2017, the state adopted a budget that showed an expectation of school taxes at the local level increasing 14% over the next 2 years. You can see this is just that bill, you can see this slide. It's not all trees.
No, it wasn't all there, it wasn't there.
Okay, the next slide.
Well, there we go.
A lot of people heard about recapture, some people call it Robin Hood. Every year, City of McKinney pays into recapture. Recapture, the idea behind it is that Collin County is a wealthy county. There are counties in the state and school districts that don't have the same opportunity, don't have the same tax revenue, don't have the same ability to provide the same education. The idea is that wealthier counties and districts will pay into the state and recapture. The state ideally distributes that to poorer districts so that every student in the state of Texas has an equal opportunity in education. This year we sent over $5 million from McKinney. Next year, under the current formula, we'll send about $11 million. The year following that will be nearly $20 million. Sadly, a significant portion of these funds go into the state general fund and not to education. So right now we're going to get to HB2, SB2. I'm going to talk about HB2, which is the bill that has the most activity right now. There's a current movement, in the state, and it used to be, conservative values talked about local control. That's over the last 5, 6, 8 years, that's become almost a negative thing in Austin. Local control is almost a bad thing. That the state is introducing legislation every 2 years that is attempting to take control from local government and put it at the state level. HB2 is arguably one of those bills. I didn't know it was going to go away once it popped up. So did you read that fast? So among other things, HB2.
Sorry.
HB2 was introduced as a property tax reform and relief bill. We are told that in the substitute bill that will be introduced shortly, that we'll see that introduced as a property tax reform and won't contain the word relief, which would be much more accurate. But some of the things that it does, it's great. It enhances transparency and truth in taxation measures. So much more information available to property owners to see how a city has arrived at everything from effective tax rate, how every dollar is spent. There's a lot of great measures. It reforms the appraisal value appeal and protest process. Right now, if you've ever gone through that, it's a difficult process. If you're not represented by a larger group or a firm, it's hard to get the same attention as an individual property owner. There's measures that change that pretty dramatically and give everyone an equal opportunity to protest their appraised values if they so choose. It provides for an automatic rollback election when triggered. Currently, it's only by petition. That's a positive thing. Voters should be able to have a say in a rollback rate that's greater than what's deemed fiscally responsible spending. It decreases the rollback rate from 8 to 2.5%. That's obviously a big part of HB2. Some of the concerns, have to wait for them. So there's been a lot of talk. Why are mayors like me down in Austin testifying on a bill versus support of the bill? Because on the surface, let's lower the tax rate from 8% to 2.5%, the rollback rate. It sounds great. I'm a taxpayer before, during, and after being mayor. I want my taxes as low as they possibly can be, but I want to live in a city that provides the services that I think are commensurate with what my expectation is. So why am I down talking about it? We missed the first one, but current cost drivers are not taken into consideration. Currently in North Texas, inflation, just CPI, inflation on grocery goods, socks, eggs, milk, has been tracking between 1.9 and 2.4%. That's not really what makes up a budget for a city. What makes up the largest part of the city's budget are wages, sworn wages, or fire and police, and these are contracts that are longer-term negotiated contracts. Healthcare for those contracts, those things have been tracking between 4 and 5.5%. Healthcare up as high as 6% annually. Construction cost inflation index has been between 4 and 6%. If you're in the construction business or you've tried to build something or buy a new home, you see the prices going up, and that's the reason. So cost drivers are not taken into consideration that are commensurate with the economy we live in. Right now, property tax relief exemptions are the biggest way a city can give property relief. In McKinney, we have an over 65 and disabled exemption. That exemption right now saves an average homeowner $348 a year. Okay? If, under the current way HB2 is written, a exemption counts against the rollback rate. So the first thing cities will do, if they determine that wages, healthcare, road construction is much higher than 2.5%, the first thing they'll do is, as opposed to chance going to an election, especially the way the laws are written now, how you can go to election, or what will be on the ballot, what you can say on the ballot, what you can or can't advocate, and we'll get to that in a minute. The first thing you do is a city will take away an exemption. They'll rescind an exemption. In the city of McKinney, the last 2 years, for example, we've been at 2.9% on average over the rollback rate. Had it been 2.5%. First year I was mayor, it was 1.9. Last year was 2.9. If we had been under this rollback rate, and we determined that we did not want to go, or we wanted to go to an election, we would have been going to the voter for an increase total of 44 cents a month. The real portion, though, that is affected here would have been just the M&O, and I guess we can talk about that in a minute, but the bottom line is it would have represented a 32-cent a month savings to you. Now, if the city decided that, hey, we can't take a chance of going to the voters. One, right now, the way the law is written, we have to write on the ballot that we want to increase the tax rate from X to Z, and I can't explain it. I can't tell you what it's for and what the difference will be to you as a taxpayer. So if we were to eliminate an exemption, what a horrible thing to eliminate an exemption that's saving someone $348 a year to save 32 cents a month on the M&O portion of it. It doesn't take into consideration revenue sources. Property taxes is just a portion. There are cities, ours represents 32, 33%. There are cities like Sugar Land, 50% of their revenue for their budget is sales tax. Now in Sugar Land, in the last several years and what they project moving forward, is a flat growth in sales tax. So to a city like Sugar Land, if you have a 2.5% cap and half of your budget is property tax, and that's a 2.5, and half of it grows at 0, you have an effective growth rate of 1.25. I don't care what you look at, any index of any kind in Texas, inflation is more than 1.25%. Conversely, in McKinney, although our percentage is lower, sales tax is growing at a much greater rate. So we might, if you average out the 32% of sales tax revenue, and that's growing at 5.5 or 6%, we may then end up with about a 3.2, 3.3%. So that's an inequitable situation between a city that will have an effective rate of 1.25 and a city like McKinney at 3.2, 3.3. If we were to determine that 2.5 was the correct amount, then we need to take into consideration what are the revenue sources. Because at the end of the day, all of that impacts the budget. I think we're missing the next. How'd you do that? Very nice. The other thing that's been discussed, and it's a very real thing. We have a AAA credit rating in the city of McKinney by both Moody and Standard & Poor's. That's a big deal. When we issue bonds, we have a bond election coming up, $350 million. Infrastructure, roads, fire stations, a number of things, parks. We enjoy the lowest possible rate on those bonds. One of the criteria, or one of the things measures looked at by a rating agency is what is a city's ability to raise revenue. What if 2008 happens tomorrow? Well, when your revenue cap or rollback rate is at 8%, they know that at any given time, any given budget cycle, the city can raise the taxes to 8%. If that's all of a sudden 2.5%, that impacts our ability to raise revenue. It has an effect potentially on our credit rating. I'm not suggesting that's the only reason to discuss whether 2.5 makes sense or not, but it's another condition that we are urging legislators to look at. Whether it's a state stopgap or some way that protects a city that enjoys, has been a fiscally responsible city, enjoys a fantastic credit rating. We don't want to penalize taxpayers now with higher bond ratings or bond rates, debt rates, because of a change in our rollback rate. And the last one, I believe, current ballot language is insufficient for rollback election. I alluded to that before. We are pushing legislators that whatever the rollback rate is, if we're going to go to have an election for taxpayers to decide whether or not we are above that rollback rate, they need to be informed. If I'm just a taxpayer, I'm not on council, I'm not in the budget cycle, and I go to election day to the ballot, and it tells me current rollback rate is 2.5%. City of McKinney is asking for putting a proposition forward to vote yes or no to raise it to 3.1. Well, in a vacuum, do I want to raise my taxes from 2.5 to 3.1 over the effective rate? My answer is no. Now, tell me that what it will mean to the average homeowner is an increase of roughly 44 cents a month, and we will be able to build a fire station that's needed in North McKinney. That's a different answer, potentially, for me. Having information, being informed is very, very important. Currently, that's not available. So whatever the rollback rate ends up being, whatever the change is, let's also fix the language in the law. Something I don't have on here, but equally important, is as a mayor, as a council person, if we're going to come to the voters and ask for a rollback election that's greater than the rollback rate, I need to be able to advocate. If you call me in my office and you say, hey, George, you know, I understand on the ballot there's a proposition to increase the rollback rate, our taxes would increase X amount. Do we really need that? Now, currently, if I answer that question, I advocate and I tell you that we need it, I'm committing a Class A misdemeanor. It's a crazy thing, but literally, I could be fined $1,000 and go to jail for up to 6 months. I need to be able to advocate if, in fact, I believe that it is important. If I'm elected, I was elected because people felt that I was, they wanted to put their trust in me, and if I believe there's a need in the city, I need to be able to speak about it. Next slide. Discussion, is it?
Who pays for the election?
The city pays for the election as well. Yeah.
Is
Now,
there
wait a minute,
election?
Jane, what's your point?
Well, who pays for the election? The state's making you call it,
Yes.
and the city has to pay for it. And then if it doesn't pass, you're out the cost of an election that is a waste of money.
Yeah, and there's actually so many other aspects of it, and I try not to get bogged down in the detail.
But you're asking a question about a rollback election.
Right.
Yeah.
If it's triggered, why does the state pay for it?
Now, to be fair, one of the things that at that point was brought up, so one of the revisions initially was to make sure that we try to time that rollback or that election with another election. But you still have to, someone's got to spend money, someone's got to educate the public, money will be spent, the city, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I have problems with these, not our county,
Right.
but some of these smaller counties that have expenses and no revenue. If they're held to 2.5%, they may go out of business.
Well, so, again, yeah, true, yeah, I believe that, number one, 2.5 wasn't pulled out of the air. Let's all agree that hopefully our legislators didn't throw a dart and just pick 2.5.
2.5 been there for a long number of years.
Yeah, it's the last several years ago, it came out 4, 4.5, 5, 6, it's been a lot of different numbers. Yeah, but it's been talked about a lot. So let's assume that, hopefully, right, that there was thought put into that. And if I believe that thought was put into it, what would the criteria have been? Well, the criteria would be, what should a city be able to operate fiscally responsibly on without any fact? Just operate, you know, within the, to provide the services that are needed in that city. Well, if I believe that's the number, the very first thing I've got to say is, well, hold on. If I believe that 2.5 is the growth of that budget that's commensurate with what is needed based on inflation and other drivers, and I know that there's a city that half of the revenue is sales tax and flat, then that mathematically, it's not opinion, it's factually, that I've just saddled that city with 1.25. So if I'm gonna have an election every year, I wanna make sure, that's $2, sir. If I, if we're gonna have an election,
I know where it goes.
let's make sure that that election is, if it doesn't pass, it doesn't
Somebody wanted to get you a roll back there.
it doesn't mortally hurt that city. Yes,
Go
sir.
ahead. Wait, did you make your point? Joe?
Yes.
All right. You had a question, Jim?
The advocates of this down in Austin are suggesting that the elections would always be held in November, not
Correct.
May. And I've got a
Well,
two-part
that
question.
just changed, but yes.
Okay, because if there's not an election in an odd year, which often is the case, what would the cost to a city like McKinney be for that
Yeah,
election?
and as I said, to be fair, that they did change that in a subsequent version. That in the right year, it would not be an issue.
So do you
Yeah.
pay for, if you have something on the November ballot, or you're not having an election in May, but the other cities are, what's the cost of the election?
About $750,000.
That's it.
Yeah. So it's a material
And
cost.
I didn't get bogged down in other detail, but keep in mind also the way the budget cycle, one of the other things that we're pushing for, this isn't just about what the rollback rate is, it's all the other things that weren't considered. What are the revenue sources? What is the ability to advocate? What is the language on the ballot if so we have to do that? What timing of the election? Right now, where the budget cycle is for the state of Texas and cities, we virtually have to, or literally have to create two budgets. One if it passes and one if it doesn't pass. You have time and effort and expense in two budgets. Then you have to start operating on one of those budgets, not knowing which budget's gonna pass. So timing issues, we're pushing for that. There's just, when I went down to speak on the bill, the soundbite is, oh my God, mayor is fighting to keep your taxes high. Well, that's a cheap shot, and it's absolutely inaccurate. What I'm fighting for is, in the 116 pages, you've missed many things. Now, in the Senate, there was absolutely no desire to have that dialogue. In the House, I was asked in to speak with the chairman. I spoke with 4 of the members of the committee, and every one of them wanted to understand, what are your concerns? And we talked about them. And I will tell you that when we first started talking about revenue sources, that was not something that was considered. We literally had to go through an education process of revenue sources and what cities have, what percentage of their budget and how the effective rate, if you're 2.5 and that's only half your budget is property tax and half is sales tax, then your effective rate is whatever the average between the two. That had not been thought about. And a myriad of other things. So when we're down discussing this bill, it's not all about 2.5. It's about what is the right rate that takes into consideration the actual real cost drivers today. How do we make sure that election, if there's an election, is not costing the city $750,000? How can we time it to where we're not doing 2 budgets and having to pick which one we're going to gamble and operate on this or not? How are we going to make sure that we don't penalize? I mean, can you imagine cities that all of a sudden were withdrawing and retracting home exemptions? And by the way, I gave an example of last year, 2.9. If the difference between 2.5% and 8% in the city of McKinney to the average household is $6.40 for the entire amount, and actually, I don't want to dig into the weeds too deep, but this bill only covers what's called the M&O, maintenance and operations portion, which is roughly 60-ish%. So really, we're talking about a $4.20, $4.30 difference to the average homeowner in the city of McKinney per month. Now, I'm not saying that's not money, it's money, it adds up. But if an exemption is taken away, that's saving you $28, and the most that it could cost you is, the M&O portion, $4.40, that's not a good trade. So if nothing else on the bill gets fixed, let's don't penalize cities, homeowners, by having that exemption count against the rollback rate formula. That would be devastating. Our greatest way to provide tax relief in the city is with exemptions, plain and simple. We're also talking about increasing exemption amounts that are available to a city to offer. Not just percentage, but even amounts. So a person that owns a $250,000 home has the same exemption ability as someone that owns a $400,000, has the same savings ability. There are so many aspects of this bill that people want to boil it, some people want to boil it down to a soundbite of it's trying to keep you from having to vote or increase your taxes. And it is so much more than that. There is so much more at stake that people do not realize because it doesn't fit on a bumper sticker. For me to explain everything I did, and I'm leaving out 95% of the other stuff just to try to have this conversation in 20 minutes, it is so much more than a tax rate. It's so much more than $4.40 a month or not.
So what do we need to do? We need to call our representative and
You need to call a representative. You need to take the time to research what I'm saying. When you do, you'll see what I'm saying is accurate. You need to, I like to research when I hear somebody talk about these things. And then you need to contact your representatives because again, there was just a mailer I received in the mail that basically put what I said to a soundbite. And I was listed in Texas scorecard as your worst enemy is your mayor. He's fighting against your taxes. The Texas Tribune wrote an article that said I'm your worst enemy because I'm trying to make sure your taxes are not lowered. Legislators need to know that people actually understand there are many aspects. And again, it's not just the rate. It's the rate. It's the election cycle. It's the exemptions.
It's the local
It's
control.
and I left out, the city gave me a presentation to bring that was 37 slides, and it was all centered around local control. I decided not to go through all that. Do I believe that local control is important? I do. I don't believe that the Austin legislators understand the city of McKinney. I know that when they put forth a legislative bill that has one city effectively capped at 1 1/4 and another one, there's one city that has 60% sales tax revenue going at 6%. They're at 5.1, I think, was the average. That's not equitable. But that condition varies, city to city, state, region to region, county to county. So what you need to do is contact legislators and tell them that you understand there's more to this bill than the soundbite of 8 to 2.5. And that, well, again, I would ask you to do the research and then talk to the people you've elected and tell your legislators that you want to keep that decision here at your level.
Now, being a native Texan, I think our local guys can handle it a lot better than Austin.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a little,
Well,
I can say that
20% of your recapture that we sent to the school district taxes went back to education, 20%. So in 2 years, we will send out of the city of McKinney, $20 million. Do you know what that will do to property taxes for school? $20 million. I didn't get into unfunded state mandates. We have this past year, we paid over $2 million to the state. We did receive $12,500 from the state. That's what we received, last year.
And George,
Literally, that's the only money we received. from the
so
state.
everybody knows, you're a developer, you
Yes, I
deal
am.
with cost, okay? You know profit and loss.
Yes,
I
I
mean,
do.
it's not an academic situation or philosophical one, you deal it from a pragmatic daily operations,
I do.
okay? And so I think that adds value to his interpretation and your concerns here.
And I'll say one last thing, and I do not mean this in any, I am a builder and developer, and but I'm very confined in one neighborhood, 46 acres in the city of McKinney. Never taken a penny from the city, by the way. But with the properties that I'm involved in, I have ownership in, and I'm part of the partnership group. This past year, we wrote a check for over $1.2 million in property taxes. So if you don't think that property taxes and lowering property taxes is important to me, as I said, before I was a mayor, while I'm a mayor, and long after I'm a mayor, what I fight for today affects me just like it affects you. And in my business, it affects me in a huge way. What taxes have done to me and some of my properties has turned me from a profitable property to a property that's not profitable. So I want property tax relief, but I know that right now there's again, great soundbite. Hey guys, we're gonna give you a property tax relief. We're gonna lower the rate from 8 to 2.5, and then everyone gets focused on that shiny ball, but we forget about recapture. We forget about defunding of schools on the state level, and none of those conversations rise to the top because they just looked out for us taxpayers. So it's a fight.
I as a former state rep, that's not fair, Mayor. That statement was not fair.
Well, tell me why it's not fair.
The legislators, we think about all of our citizens, both corporate and individuals, and take all of their thoughts into thought. So some of the people that are on one side are not on the same side you are, but they have a right to have their voice said.
No, they absolutely do, sir, but when you have, and you're right, by the way, I should clarify and say, when I speak of legislators, I'm not talking about all legislators, but I'm talking about right now, here's some factual statements. We've defunded schools at the state level from 48 to 38%. We have enacted recapture. We spend 20% at the state level, goes back to education, the rest goes to the state fund. We've been growing the state budget over 6% a year. The cost in the city of McKinney, for example, and cost per capita resident over the last 10 years has grown, on the whole 10 years, 4.2%. At the state level, it's 18.7%. And that's after all the unfunded state mandates. So although I believe you are correct, and I have friends at the state level, everyone wants to do good. No, I don't believe that there's any cynicism that people are getting elected and wanting to hurt taxpayers or residents. I get that. But the fact is, we have a state budget that is growing at a pace that the cities have been subsidizing now for a long time, from unfunded mandates to education, and that's a fact. That's not my opinion. That's dollars and cents.
I'm not so sure about the city stuff.
Okay, go ahead, the last question.
Well, but unfunded mandate, sir, if the state is
Well,
requiring
we all
us-
agree about mandates. Let's talk about, no, I'm not gonna get an argument.
Oh, no, but I
I'm
mean-
not gonna debate anybody. Okay, I'll talk
I
later.
just want to mediate this.
Sure.
The strong accusation stands when it's launched at particular special interest groups.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that should be.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And I won't say Empower Texans in particular.
I would never say that, but yes. Absolutely. Listen, Empower Texans have written, I have had
Too
nasty
old.
article after nasty article written, because again, the soundbite.
Right, they're the bumper stickers. So that strong accusation stands against some
Absolutely.
groups.
And well
by the
said.
way,
Yeah.
those people are on both sides of the issue.
Some are.
Okay,
Yeah, there.
any closing, last questions? David, okay, yes, sir, Professor?
Just, I'm sorry I'm not a member here, but I would like to just
You can be.
raise a question.
Richard will take your donation right now.
I meant to make as a suggestion. Obviously, what's behind all of this is the notion that despite this sort of nominal democratic character of local government, that it doesn't work. The reason you can't sell a tax increase is because you're not connected with the people despite the nominal democracy. That would be the claim. And I agree with you, this looks like a ham-fisted, just kind of block-headed, well, we'll make them have elections every year for their budget. But I'm wondering if there is, I don't have a particular solution, but you all in local governments can't think of a way to come up with some alternative proposals that have nothing to do with this particular 2.5%. Just something to acknowledge that taxpayers often do feel, despite their nominal vote, that there is just like somebody else is making all these decisions, and then we get a big fat wad, a big massive bill at the end of the year. If there's some other way to try to address at least the perception of a disconnect, that you're elected, but you're really not.
It should be
You've
pointed
got
out.
somebody else doing, you're working some other
And
way.
it should be pointed out that a lot of people go to the appraisal districts and think that appraisals have been rather unfairly done.
Yeah,
Yes.
well, no doubt, and listen, there's a lot of people in my position that are making the statement, hey, it's not the city, it's the appraisal district. But here's the reality.
But the reality is, you put people on the appraisal district.
Well, but even, forget that, let's say we appointed everyone, and let's say we're responsible for the appraisal district going crazy. At the end of the day, the city has the second part of that equation. So I don't care if the appraisal district came and raised all of our property values tenfold, we could have a rate that reflected that. Now, I just gave two absurd examples, I don't think I can make up even with zero.
No, I agree.
But my point
You're right
is,
there.
there's no, that's not a, don't let elected officials off the hook by them saying it's the appraisal district. We have half of the equation.
I
But-
don't
You can lower
I don't
the
know about the hook.
Okay, Fanny?
I'm sorry, but as citizens, I have never missed but one vote, and I'm 78 years old. I go and vote, I work for good candidates, invest a lot of my time, hoping we're going to make a difference. In reality, lobbyists are behind all of this. Am I wrong?
I'm not saying anything.
And we
Okay.
should-
We could, that's, I love to
Good
get that
point,
section about
Fred.
campaign finance reform and all, and put an end to so many things, but.
I'm sorry, I opened a can of
No, I
worms.
couldn't agree more.
Now, tomorrow, we can't remember all this. Is there a website or someone, if they need to refresh what you're saying, is
You know,
there any point?
it's the same thing that was suggested before about just Googling, if you don't know how to get in touch with them, you can Google your representative, both House
What
and
is the
Senate,
bill number?
HB2.
Oh, that's-
Just call Jersey.
Okay.
George,
Yes, sir.
one thing, my observation is we're talking about taxes. What you need to have is a transparency of budget.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
you spend your budget right, and then you have to collect the money. And, I mean, if Empower Texas wants you to have a lower budget, I mean, do they want to pick a fire station, a police squad? I mean, what do they want to eliminate? Because you're giving up something to reduce the budget. I mean, that's the whole answer, and I think
Absolutely.
there needs to be better communication of this is what our budget is, this is where our revenue comes from.
For the city of McKinney, you know, we were the first entity in the entire state to receive the 5-star Transparency Award. So one thing we've done before any other city, and many cities are still not doing it, but our budget, worksheets, everything is online, and it has been for a couple of years. But you're right, the majority of the cities, it's a lot of work to get to it, and to get detail beyond just a line item is very difficult.
And you need to disclose on your sales tax collections how the state keeps 1% of it.
Yeah.
Because nobody understands that. The state funds their whole controller department from the 1% they take out of the 1%.
By the way, that fee was doubled. Just not
Oh,
too long
it's
ago.
2%. Yeah, they're short, so.
All right.
But they're helping us in the process.
Thank you, everybody.